Okay.
You're out on the West Coast somewhere?
Yes, sir. California, one of the
Okay, I'm out
most.
there all the time on business.
Okay. Okay. All right. So we are live and special guest. I'm so happy he's here. Mr. Chris Bacon. Uh, I guess let me just ask you just off the rip. Do you have an end game at this point? Is it
No.
just criticisms and you're seeing things from your vantage point that you don't like, you don't agree with, or is there a methodical way you're trying to handle this, or you just say, you know what, I don't like what I see, and I'm saying something about it?
Well, there's no end game. And I guess the end game would be the end of the Rippaverse. And not
Okay.
because that's my goal to see him fail, but based on some things that he's done, I certainly wouldn't object to it.
Okay.
And what I've done is I don't go out and take really personal shots at Eric. People say things about his beard or his back hair or how short he is or whatever. I don't care about any of that. I followed the Rippaverse primarily from a business standpoint. And if
Okay.
anybody who is familiar with me or the content that I put out, it's been, this is what he's done from a business standpoint. I have followed his campaigns, the financials very closely, particularly the Alpha Core and ISIM 2 campaigns. And I put out my thoughts on what has he done from a business standpoint that's impacted the bottom line.
Okay.
For example, from Alpha Core, he's down almost 70% from the total purchasers and revenue that he from Alpha Core from ISIM 1.
Okay.
So I've looked at this from a business standpoint to say, hey, what has he done? Things that have happened. And I've criticized a lot of what he's done business wise, whether it's, why do you have a warehouse? Why are you buying 50,000 copies of a book that you haven't been able to sell?
Okay.
Why are you lying to customers about product availability? And why on God's earth have you said that you're anti-social justice and all that stuff, anti-feminist? You've made video after video, post after post against LGBTQ people, feminist and all that stuff. And then you've gone out and hired somebody like the Soska sisters. And what impact that might have on your business. So I followed it from that standpoint, but no, there's no end game. There's no thing I'm trying to particularly accomplish by, following Eric July in the Rippaverse.
Okay. So let's do this. Let's take a trip back down memory lane and what you said to me. So can you get us up to speed on how you came of knowing the Rippaverse, how you got immersed into it, and just let's just take it from there from
Sure.
The origin story.
So back in 2018, 2019, I followed Eric July at the time through Facebook and some of his postings that he was making up from the political space.
Okay.
From there, I ended up saying something on his Facebook page about anarcho-capitalism, and it was basically like a fantasy, land to live in, and that type of approach to politics.
Okay.
Excuse me. And he took exception to that, so he wanted to have a live debate with me, which I said, okay, sure. So I had a debate with him on his stream and talked about it. And, we came to some agreements and some disagreements. I didn't apologize for my take. He certainly, of course, didn't apologize for his. But that's how we came to know each other.
Okay.
Through that. Also, not too long after that, in 2019, I found out that he lives in the same neighborhood that I do. He literally lives right down the street. So I met with him a few times, just had lunch with him, stopped by his house, shot the shit about whatever was going on, in the world. Never about comics or anything like that. But, whenever I met with him, he was very cordial. He was very nice. He was very polite. I found him to be, a good guy. And I had supported him financially for quite some time. At one point in time, I was his largest financial supporter through his, whether it was super chats or, PayPal donations or whatever. And when I met with him, I said, Eric, I like what you do. You're entertaining. You're good at what you do in your presentation and your product that you're putting out here. I don't mind supporting this. And I did. And when he started the Rippaverse, I, don't really care about comics, but this is a person that I had long supported and I wanted to support his new endeavors.
Right.
So that's, kind of the background on how I, got to following the Rippaverse and how I met and came across Eric July.
So when did things begin to go left? Or when did you say, you know what, I don't like the direction he's going? What was that moment for you?
Well, again, I had followed his Rippaverse business from a business perspective. I didn't do it from the sake of like, oh, there's 3D art assets. I don't like the story. I don't like the book. I've got all the books. I've read them all. And I don't really care. It doesn't do anything for me. I wasn't going through and funneling all this stuff. But during the course of his business, particularly with this last Alpha Core campaign, he started doing some things that I felt were not good business practices.
Okay.
The primary thing where I just completely lost support was when he was lying to customers about product availability. I looked at that as a person who had bought the books. He had put out books that were supposedly limited editions, whether it was signature series books, whether it was books that were only supposed to be available during certain campaigns, and he kept selling them. He was selling them to comic book shops. And I just said, I can't agree with that. I can't support that. If you're supposed to be doing business the correct way, you're supposed to be the alternative to Marvel and DC. I can't support this.
Mm-hmm.
And where I first started to really question what he was doing is the situation with the ISOM ministry, with the trademarks. And when he came out with his video, basically saying they were fake Christians and making underhanded comments about this ministry for protecting a trademark, which was their legal right to pursue protection of that. And that really started giving me pause. And I'm on the record saying, if I was that ministry, I would also sue him for slander, because that was just a really low blow. It didn't make me pull back on my support completely, but it really kind of started opening my eyes to say, what kind of guy is this really, that these are the tactics that he's taking? And also, again, how we replied to criticism, whether it was with Dick Masterson, Ethan Van Sciver, Nick Rekieta. Everybody who's watching this is probably familiar with that in some form or fashion, so I won't rehash it. But I was thinking, what kind of person is doing this? I'm going to reserve judgment and focus on why I support him to begin with from a business standpoint. But there was starting to be some things that were said by him that started giving me question. And again, when he went through with the lying to customers, it's like, okay, that's a bridge too far, and I'm not willing to support this anymore.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't his whole political ideology to a certain extent is like a Christian conservative base? Is that his foundation?
He is a self-proclaimed man of God. Again, I've never had the personal conversations with him about his faith, but I mean, in the video that he put out about ISM, I'll take him for his word that he's a self-proclaimed man of God.
Okay. So we got the issue with the ministry's situated, settled, whatever the case may be. The monetize the haters, okay, so I'm looking at it from a different angle than what you are, because obviously you're much closer to it than I am. I don't understand how he didn't see antagonizing those that are not, on his side, is a win. You be on this platform long enough, you're gonna have people, detractors, haters, whatever the case may be, and for you to, it seemed like he kind of rubbed his success in their faces. Now, I get criticism for saying, well, Sly, you telling black man be humble. Not necessarily. Now, how do you see that from your vantage point?
Well, I'll say this. From a monetize your haters standpoint, I personally don't care. If he wants to monetize his haters, I don't care. However somebody makes their money, as long as it's fairly moral and ethical, I don't really care. Responding to people who don't like him for various reasons. And there are people who don't like him for, I would say, fairly shallow reasons, right? Okay. But at the same time, what thing that people don't like him for is he's, like you said, he's antagonistic.
Mm-hmm. Extremely.
He's not going to think really before he says anything. I think rational people can look at anything he says and think of at least a dozen different ways that he could have replied to that would have said, okay, I get it, or just completely shut the person down.
Right.
Like, for example, he went on Dick Masterson's Yellow Flash's stream, was talking with Dick Masterson, and Dick Masterson was criticizing him. If he wanted to shut that down, he could have said, okay, I hear what you're saying. Dick, thank you for taking the time to read the book. Thank you for your comments. And I'll take them under advisement. And, I want to get better. Just so everybody knows, this was my first project. It was really a passion project. I wanted to get into the comic book space. And, maybe mistakes were made, but I was really passionate. I wanted to get this out. I wanted to get my name on something and share this with the world. If it didn't come across good as far as the story or the writing, if you didn't like it, that's okay. I'm going to do better. And then he could have gotten off stream, kicked, yelled, bitched, and screamed and said, fuck that guy, I don't care, and ignored it. But on camera, act accordingly, right? And the way that he portrays himself, I don't think he's done himself any favors, whether it's anybody that he's interacted with. And it's unfortunate, but he brings it all on himself. But he's got a legion of people who are behind him, who will support anything he does, any action that he takes. And they're not doing him any favors either. He said in a recent stream, I was talking with my boys and they're, telling me I need to move different in 2024. I don't know what the hell that means. But, we'll see. But he's got a long way to go. And it's going to be a hard urge for him to fight, I think. It's going to be an uphill battle for him.
Well, let me ask you, why do you feel that he is so unwilling to accept criticism, even if it's coming from a loving place?
I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer. The only thing I can think of is if you are that passionate about something and you put time and effort into it and you feel above it, I don't know. And I think one of his flaws with the whole process is he made so much money off that first ISOM campaign. And I think in his mind, he said to himself, I made all this money. I must be doing something right. I'm above all of this, as opposed to also thinking, I made all of this money before anybody ever saw page 1 of this book. I didn't have to prove myself to an industry, to a group of people through my work. People bought the book and continue to buy my books to support me and me alone. So I don't think that ever registered with him.
Okay.
Maybe, hopefully one day it will. But I think that was probably a flaw that he had. Like, whenever he's gone on with it, talked with anybody, and you can hear him say it and all this stuff. I'm the owner of a multi-million-dollar comic book business.
He says that a lot.
Yeah, you certainly are. But do you have any reason why? Because people aren't buying your product. They're buying you. And I don't think he's recognized that. And the sooner he comes to that realization, the better off he'll be. But I think at this point, even though it's still early, he's only been in business, a little less than 2 years. I think he's already kind of crossed the Rubicon with a lot of people, whether it's, the constant blocking and banning of people on Twitter, the yelling at people, his fans and the way that they go after people, the people that he associates with and the way that they go after people. It's not productive and it's not helpful, but we'll have to see what happens here.
From a marketing standpoint, do you think him using the culture war as the inspiration or the motivation to purchase his comics, do you think that was a smart move?
Well, I'll say this. Whenever he started the Rippaverse, and he's on the record about this, he was very, very clear. I'm not doing this for any particular political reason. This is an apolitical book company and all of these things. I'm putting these books out to just tell a story, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, when he got the attention from the media, the Blaze, Fox News, the Daily Wire, they presented him in a way that helped sell their agenda. Anti-woke, anti-woke comic hero, anti-woke company, and he never corrected them.
Right.
And instead of saying, guys, I can see why that might be what you're saying, but that's not who I am, and that's not what I'm trying to bring to the table. And hammered that home, or at least followed up with a stream to say, hey, as you see, I was on the Daily Wire with Michael Knowles or Fox News with whoever. This is what these people are saying. I want to remind you that's not who we are. These people are going to have their narrative, but this is who I really am. And because he's not good enough to figure that out for himself, because he clearly isn't, he doesn't have the ability to do it. I think he was a prisoner of the moment. He didn't know how to handle himself. And instead of controlling the narrative, he went with it. So now you've got people like yourself, like you brought that up, the anti-woke culture war narrative. Everybody else has said the same thing, but he got too much attention for it. And I think maybe he didn't want to bite the hand that feeds him. I don't know. Because after he went on those appearances, his book sells, and I can pull this stuff up because, again, I kept this. I kept up a lot with this, and I kept a lot of dates for when this happened. So going back to the first campaign, he made his first Fox News appearance on July 15th, 2023, when the sales of ISOM 1 were at $1.65 million. By the end of day 7, after his Fox News appearance, it was up to over 2.5. He had another appearance on Fox News on July 21st, his second appearance. And by the 23rd, or I'm sorry, the 27th of July, he had gotten to $3.2 million on the way to a $3.7 million campaign. And he got a Blaze appearance on day 2 when he was at 1.1 million because they caught on to the sales figures that he had. So he got a lot of help from the media. And I think he didn't want to slow that momentum. And if people were going to say he was anti-woke, whatever keeps the dollars running in.
Right.
And do I fault him for that? Hell no. Are you going to turn down that kind of money because somebody said you're anti-woke?
Right. Not at all.
Absolutely not. But for the sake of integrity and the message that you put out before, I think you have an onus to correct the record, whenever the hell that may be. But I think he had the onus to correct the record, and he just didn't.
Now for me, I never heard of this guy up until the Kyle Rittenhouse thing. That was my first time ever hearing of him or anything about his affiliations, whatever the case may be. And the whole Rittenhouse thing was such a divider. It didn't matter race, class, even gender, 2A, non-2A, rights advocates, whatever the case may be. It was such a hot button issue. And I couldn't understand why he felt the need to insert himself into that. Because I felt like that was, as a man of color, that was none of our business. Right. And I'm sitting here like, seeing there you go, sticking your nose in other people's business.
Well, I'll say this real quick.
Yeah.
He's been a Blaze contributor for a while.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That's I can't, obviously I can't speak for him, but whether it was that or like the George Floyd situation, he's a media contributor to where, he would be asked about that and to make comments on it. So I have to believe to some extent that's why he would have made any of those types of comments.
Okay. And then after that, I started, following more and more comic anime channels or whatever the case may be, and I just saw them. He would just start popping up here and there on their panels and platforms, and I'm just like, the optics don't look too good. It just felt like, because you had to ask me, but where I get a lot of, me and my guy, we get a lot of flack is, he's tokenized. So, and I'm not sure how anyone else doesn't see it any other way, because hot button issues he's always brought in as, like you said, the media, the person to speak about as the resident expert of the situation. I'm just like, no, that's normally how that works. You find somebody that's not gonna rebuff your answers or criticize your narrative, and you speak to whatever agenda they're pushing for that topic. And I saw him on Yellow Flash and a couple of other guys. I'm just like, I don't like the way this looks. And it just, for me, I have no issues against Flash per se. I think he feeds onto the anti-wokeness a bit too much. It's like at some point this is all going to die down. and there's going to be something else to be upset about. How do you see that? What's your take on that?
Well, again, as far as culture war, tokenization or whatever, to be quite honest, it's not something I really focus too much on. I'm more of like an issues guy.
Okay.
I try to be as objective as I possibly can. For example, whenever I make criticism about Eric July and the Rippaverse, I always bring receipts. I don't put out editorial information, whether it's about his numbers or any like the Soska sisters, any of that stuff. I bring information. I'm not going to editorialize anything. So when it comes to those types of things, I'm looking at this as an issue. I don't understand really the whole culture war phenomenon, why people do what they're going to do, why things have to be divisive. I can look at my own life and say, okay, for example, whether it's the alphabet people, right? Do I have any personal animosity towards gays? No. Do I care what willing adults do with each other? No. But at the same time, am I going to teach my children that that's an appropriate lifestyle? Am I going to bring that into my household and say that's okay? No, I'm not.
Right.
But I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. So I don't look at this necessarily as a culture war or whatever. I understand that from a media standpoint, whether it's the right or it's the left, you're pandering to an audience. You're trying to get clicks, likes, super chats, or advertising dollars, or whatever it is that you're trying to do from people who are in your echo chamber or follow your political persuasion. And from a business standpoint, I guess I can respect that. Does that do anything for society? Does it make it better? Does it make it less divisive?
Mm-hmm.
No. And are there people who gravitate towards that type of material, whether it's the culture war in any way, shape, or form? Yeah, absolutely. We see it all the time on the internet, whether it's from the entertainment standpoint of like the geeks and gamers and the neurotic crowd, and you see every one of their videos, Disney owned, Marvel, implodes, or whatever type of language that they're using, or like the Gina Carano thing. They've been beating that horse for literally 3 years. When they made the thing, when she filed her lawsuit, I was like, how far does this really go back? Holy shit. It goes back like to 2021.
Yeah.
When she got released from the Mandalorian. And I'm thinking, guys, I can appreciate the hustle. It's something for you to talk about. It's what your audience shows up for. It's what you get your super chats for. But is this a culture war? I mean, who are you convincing? Everybody who's convinced on one side is convinced on that side, and there's not really going to be much you can do to change it.
Right.
And vice versa. Is it entertaining as all hell sometimes? Yeah, it is. We're talking about it right now. But is it moving society forward in any way whatsoever in a positive direction? No, it's not. And do I pretend to participate in that? Absolutely not. I could honestly care less. I got too much going on, just trying to get my kids, through the day and get myself through the day to worry about what's going on, with other people and their impact on the culture. It's not affecting my life in any meaningful way whatsoever.
Well, before I get to the Soska sisters, what do you think his next pivot would be once this thing dies down?
When you say this thing dies down,
as far as the culture war rhetoric, because at some point it's going to kind of plateau. It's plateauing now, but at some point you're not going to be able to get everybody upset. Like, oh, look what Disney's doing again. They're at it again.
I don't know. It's hard to say. I think from an overall culture, what is going to take precedence in the news, for example, mainstream news, I don't think that's going to necessarily affect him, because you've got people that he associates with that are ones that he shares an audience with. Not a big of a piece of the audience as he thinks. Obviously, for example, Nerdrotic has over 960,000 subscribers.
Right.
Eric July has 8,900 purchasers from AlphaCore. He's getting a very small piece of that pie, but there's a big enough group of people out there who are pushing this product, let's just call it what it is. It's a consumer product for these folks, whether it's that Jeremy Griggs, D-Day Cobra guy, Nerdrotic Geeks and Gamers, take your pick of your favorite commentator in that space.
Right.
And as long as they are there to churn that, to keep that product out there, they can ride that wave as long as they can, as long as that audience is willing to participate in it. And like they showed from MegaCon when they did that joint panel, I mean, they packed out a pretty large room of people who will eat that up. And I imagine they're going to ride that till the wheels fall off. And, if that's their product and if that's their industry, more power to them.
Okay. What are your thoughts on him referring to his project as a product?
I'll say this. I'm on the record about that. And to be quite honest, I don't really see a problem with it because again, I look at this from a business standpoint. You are in business to make money, right? At the end of the day, you're not doing this for charity. There's no nobility in poverty, none of that shit. You need to do what you need to do to move your product. Again, as long as it's done in a moral and ethical way and you're doing those things, but referring to it as a product, I don't care. It's a product. If you're paying money for it, it's a product. Now, there's a lot of people on the other side who will say, no, it's art. It's art. You can't look at it that way. You got to make the good art first. You got to have the story. You got to take your time. Who fucking cares? If you can sell millions of dollars worth of product, more power to you. Idiots buy stuff all the time. You can sell stuff to stupid people. If you're old enough, you remember the pet fucking rock. People will buy anything. So if you can find an audience for what you're selling, milk the shit out of it. The more, the better. The higher the profit margins, the better. He's selling his book for $35 or $28. Who fucking cares? If you can move it, do it. Because if you're going to tell me you wouldn't do the same thing given the opportunity, you are lying. And it's just that simple. I appreciate the people who come out and say the things about the art. Yeah, and I don't have any problem with that. But I'm also on the record saying, hey, if you are doing business, you can do business and art at the same time. You just got to be strategic about it and do it the right way. But again, I do think there's a lot of people in the space who are like, I've got to put out a masterpiece every single time. It's got to be perfect. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Set the expectation of what your product is going to be. Say, hey, this is the highest end product I can give you. But I'm going to call this a collector's edition. In the meantime, to help move the story along and get you interested, I'm going to put out some digital floppies that are $5. It's not going to be my A game. It's going to either just be in black and white, and it's just going to be a short story. And in the meantime, once a week, I'm going to put out like an old Sunday comic book panel. That's 4 panels. That's going to give you a little bit of a taste of what I'm doing. That'll come out on Twitter once a week. The floppy will come out every couple of months. And whenever the fuck I get done with the masterpiece, the thing that everybody wants, I'll put out a collector's edition, but build anticipation for that product and then put out your masterpiece. It doesn't have to be perfect. And if you're trying to make money doing this, why wouldn't you do what can make you money and then still fill your artistic need to be perfect? Just do it later and do it on your own time, but give the audience a reason to be invested. So that's kind of my take on that. And, again, to Eric July and the Ripverse, yeah, am I a supporter of your product? No. Do I want you to fail now? Yeah, I kind of do because of some of the stupid shit that you've done. But in the meantime, milk those sons of bitches for every dollar you possibly can, because God knows you're going to need it. So milk them early and milk them often.
Okay, so speaking of the numbers, his numbers have been dwindling. You have the actual numbers. Can you speak to how much they've declined with each campaign?
Yeah, sure. So again, I've kept pretty extensive numbers. The Alpha Core campaign is the one I followed every single day. These aren't proprietary numbers. These are the numbers that are posted on his website every day. So to give you an example, I kept a running spreadsheet. It's at Reddit Rippaverse Detractors. I posted one every single day. So if you look at that, he was down 7,085 purchasers from ISOM 2. He was down $1,050,895 from that time. As far as total purchasers, he was down 69% from ISOM 1, 35% from ISOM 2, and he's lost 7 figures from the previous campaign, the last 2 campaigns. So he's bleeding customers and he's bleeding money. And he is on the record from a transparency statement that he released after ISOM 2 about the things that he did, buying a warehouse, buying all of these things, buying a whole bunch of copies of ISOM 1, and a bunch of things that no person who is a thinking person would ever do. He's made some very questionable business decisions that can certainly be scrutinized. But yeah, he's bleeding in every way that a person can bleed, financially, from a customer standpoint, from even an average purchase amount standpoint. So he's not going in the right direction. And I think some of the statements that he made and some of the things that he did during the Alpha Core campaign, I wouldn't say reek of desperation, but I think it's telling why he was doing some of the things that he was doing and what he's trying to do to build an audience. But a lot of the things that he's doing, I don't think are working for him. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
I think a lot of people who are in the YouTube space know who Tim Pool is, right? So on day 40 of the Alpha Core campaign, he went on Tim Pool and another pop culture podcast or stream called Pop Culture Crisis. Between those streams that people tuned in live for, and within 24 hours, there were over 500,000 people who watched these streams. In the days following, the day of the stream, he got 60 orders. The next day, 39. The next day, 60. The next day, 57. So that wasn't moving the bar. The day, just to give you some context, the day before the Tim Pool stream, 51. The day before that, 27. The day before that, 28. The day before that, 62. He's not doing things that are moving the needle. He's continually going to the same well. I've described it as a shrinking pond. And, you know, how much are the people who are in the shrinking pond going to eat? How many books can you buy? How many covers of this shit do you want? How much Rippaverse merch do you need every 3 months? I don't know. And I think it's going to start to be telling, because for each of these campaigns, he sold about 50% books, 50% merch. This one was probably more about 55, 45, 60, 40. And the merch numbers are starting to kind of decrease versus the book stuff. So that's telling. But yeah, he's not doing himself any favors in, you know, what it is that he's doing. He just went to MegaCon. You saw the videos. Maybe you saw the videos that he posted about it. He's, you know, saying, hey, man, we had lines wrapped around the building, you know, from pillar to post sort of thing. And then the Saskas kind of sold him out and threw him under the bus because they posted a picture of just the room with their panel. It wasn't standing room only like the Critical Drinker Nerdrotic thing was. So, of course, you're not going to do it. It was maybe half full, maybe 50 people in a 100-seat room, open chairs everywhere. I think that's more indicative of where he is with his audience and what draw he really has, because those people didn't show up at that con to see his ass.
Right.
Okay. And again, so yeah.
Before we get to the Soska sisters, does this feel like a quick cash grab with no long-term planning or thought to it?
I don't think he started this as a cash grab. I really don't. I really honestly give him the benefit that he did this as a passion project. He wanted to do this. Leading up to it, he had talked about it on his streams for about 2 years. I'm going to start a comic book company. I want to do it. I'm getting pieces in place and all of these things. I really think he wanted to do it. But I think when he got the response from ISOM 1, something changed.
Okay.
I think he got to the point where, again, he thought he was bigger than what he really was, more important than what he really was, and probably more importantly, thought his product was better than what it really was. And that type of attitude and that type of approach is why people stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt and have nitpicked the shit out of his books, whether it's from the 3D art assets to the writing to any and every single thing. And again, I think if he would have played it cool, showed some humility, um, that focus and that level of scrutiny doesn't come. And I'll tell you what, I'll speak for myself. It certainly wouldn't have come from me.
So would you say that Dick Masterson and Ethan Van Sciver's, their breakdown of his product, was it fair, or do you think they were kind of nitpicking a bit or kind of picking on him because he's the new kid on the block?
Well, I think, again, this is just from an outside looking in, because me personally, again, like I said earlier, I don't care about the art. I don't care about the story. But I think probably it was, as they like to say, in good faith. They said, hey, this is how we see it. And Eric's kind of, overall response was, oh, I made all this money. People love it. I don't fucking care. And that was, his general kind of response to this. But yeah, I think, anybody who's taking time to read a book, prepare notes, they're not doing it for shits and giggles.
Right.
They're like, hey, this is kind of how I see it. This is what I think about it. And with Ethan, he's a comic book pro. He made a couple of, well, I think 3 now, long streams where he took the pen to the paper and marked it up.
It was brutal. I was like, ooh.
So I don't think he was just making stuff up to say, I'm going to say this about this page because I just think that's the case. I don't think that was the case at all. But obviously, at that point, Ethan had enough of Eric. He's like, I'm just going to let my thoughts and opinions known at this point. Obviously, I can't speak for the man. I've never spoken with Ethan Van Sciver, but that's my take from the outside looking in.
Okay. So he's been aligning himself with certain people that have certain ideologies. And for me, the most glaring one of them is the Soska sisters. And I went down that rabbit hole, man. And I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me right now? And I'll let you speak to that.
Sure.
So, because I watched your video, the tweet was extremely disturbing. I was just like, this is who he aligned himself with. Like, my God. So explain to me, or give me the breakdown of them, and why would he align himself with them? Like, of all the people you want to go left with, why them?
Okay, so I'll start from the beginning. Before I kind of put out my expose on Reddit, there were some people who were kind of starting to make noise about, hey, the Rippaverse is woke. Look who he's doing. Look who he's bringing in. Look who he's getting involved. They would say, like, here's some things that they've said. There wasn't a whole lot of buzz about that. And I said, you know what? I want to look into this more, because he's got this Yaira project coming out. And again, I'm looking at this from a business standpoint. How is this going to potentially affect his business? And what are his fans going to say about that? Are these women bringing people to the table? And I started looking through and saying, okay, these women are definitely, alphabet apologist, feminist, ladies who are certainly would fit the bill of the SJW that Eric July is on the record saying, we got to get away from. This is the comic culture in Marvel and DC. These are the people that he's brought on. People have brought up videos that he said in the past, like, you've got to gatekeep against these types of people. They'll infiltrate you and they'll destroy you, basically. And I was like, okay, so how is this going to affect business? And I said, how is his audience going to react to this? What are people going to say when they're finding this stuff out? And it got a lot of reads. I mean, I don't have but maybe 58 followers on Rippaverse Detractors, but I get ratioed on that hard when it comes to people who read it. And I certainly had quite a bit to do on what, for good or for better or worse, on how this narrative has played out. And people started bringing other things out there. Not only are they SJWs, but this is their past. They've done hardcore pornography. They have put out the tweets again about, the children and saying like, hey, these are some twins in the rape van.
Yeah.
And I took exception to that hard. I don't know if you have kids.
I got kids. Yeah.
I've got kids.
Yeah. I don't play with that stuff. Yeah.
And a person who is of right mind is not going, especially if you've got children, is not going to look at that and say, you know what? That was just in jest. That was a decade ago. I'm thinking the Saskas are about my age. I'm 42. I think they're about 40. When you're in your 30s, you know what's appropriate and what's not. And for you to make a tweet taking pictures of children and putting rape van in the same tweet, I find that inexcusable.
Yeah.
Completely inexcusable. And I even went on Eric July's community page and I said, look, dude, this is what you're supporting. I never read if there was any comments or any type of replies, but I said, this is disgusting. What the hell? How are you going to advocate for this? How are you going to condone this? And what's followed is he put out a statement saying, your guys are all a bunch of faggots if you don't think this is okay. This was stuff that was in the past. This was over a decade ago. Why are you bringing this stuff up? The things that they're doing are raunchy. And I'm just thinking, really? This is the reply. All of the evidence is here. The LGBTQ stuff aside, but just from you're proclaiming to be a man of God on one hand, and these are the people that you're bringing into your house on the other. But you're making excuses. Leave it at the door. Leave it at the door. Really? You've seen their work. The Black Widow series that he was so enamored with, that he went to bat with after they got kicked off of Twitter the first time.
I remember. Yeah.
Is it a bad book? No. Is the story good? Yeah. But I mean, it's grindhouse. It's, and Eric even said, they're breaking up a child exploitation ring. How bad can it be? Okay. And what? That doesn't absolve them of this. And then he said in the video that he put out, because again, he just can't do what he said he was going to do in the statement. I'm not bringing this up again. He doubled down and made a video about it. You just said this was the only statement you're going to make, and now you're making a video? Shut the fuck up, dude. You're never doing yourself any favors when you keep doubling down. Look at what they did since Black Widow. Look what they've done recently. I've talked with them. They don't believe that stuff anymore. Blah, blah, blah. I said, all right, challenge accepted. Let me see what I can find. And I posted that to my Reddit forum to say, hey, you wanted something lately or what they've done since Black Widow? Here's this. That's lately for you. I gave them examples from 2022, 2023. These are the types of films that they've continued making. If they've turned away from that, why are they doing that? Look at, some of these other projects. You're saying that you're a man of God. There was a guy who did something for him, and he said, this is kind of a love letter to the Soska sisters. Here's the character. One of the characters' names was Church Burner. Really, dude? Church Burner? What? I was like, these ladies have lied to you. Whatever the fuck they've told you about how they've changed, this is the evidence. These are the things that they're putting out. In 2022, they put out this movie called On the Edge, which is basically some torture flick. Okay, that's fine in and of itself, but you're telling me these ladies have changed and they're not bringing any of this stuff with them. And I think it's important too to say, okay, we'll separate the art from the artist. And you can do that in a lot of different ways and a lot of times, right? You can have, whether somebody is a singer, an actor, or whatever, you can say, this is how they are in their personal life, but they're not bringing it to the screen or to their pages or to their songs or whatever else the case may be. But these ladies, their life imitates their art in every way, shape, or form. And every day I've been posting a very disturbing video that they did where they sit down, and Katie, who just replied in this, is the one who brought this video to my attention, and I post it every day. It's these women being interviewed by the director of this film what's like a vomit torture porn film.
Was it called regurgitate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Oh
I'm
my God.
thinking,
Yeah.
and you look and you're looking at this video and you're looking at the expression on these women's faces,
Yeah.
what they're saying, and it's in all sincerity. They show them looking at a clip of this movie and they're just like, this is beautiful, and glorifying a person who groomed, manipulated, apparently a family member for a sex toy,
Yeah.
and basically saying that this person's suicide was somehow righteous and somehow beautiful, and glorified this. I don't give a fuck how long it's been. If that's what you're into, how are you ever going to walk back from that? So I'm looking at this thinking, Eric, how can you keep making excuses for this? How? And what's even more disturbing is his followers, the hardcore ones, because there's certainly, say, for example, out of the 13,252 people who made purchases, and I think that number is less because that's total purchases, not unique purchasers, but there's a lot of these people who aren't commenting on Twitter. They're not commenting on YouTube. They're not making videos. They're not joining live streams like we're having now. There's a silent majority out there who I think is going to reject what he's doing, because at the end of the day, these people found Eric July through the internet and they're following this stuff. They're not commenting on it. And for different reasons, people like myself, we're open to that criticism and critique. We'll handle the punches that come to us from the crazies on his fan base,
right,
and those folks. But there's a lot of people who don't want to subject themselves to that. So they're not going to make comments. But I think he's going to be very surprised how many people reject this product, because I don't think anybody who isn't completely morally bankrupt can say, I'm going to give money to these people and enrich their lives in any way, shape, or form, because it's absolutely sick. And I'm on the record too saying, Eric, you're a piece of shit. You're a piece of shit. If this is what you're prepared to condone and put your name by, you're a piece of shit. And if you had a kid and you thought that post, that tweet, even though if it's a decade ago, was okay, I don't have anything else to say to you. And when he made his video, he didn't quote the tweet. He said set van. He didn't say rape van, set van.
Yeah.
So here's a man who I think, because he can't be wrong, he won't be wrong. He's going to spin it any way that he can to say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to say it. And I know there's a certain percentage of these people who are going to make excuses for me and eat it up regardless. And the people that he associates with, I don't know how they can continue making all of these videos about how woke Disney is and how woke the culture is and all of these forms of medium and still talk with this guy.
Right.
He's brought it into his house. If Marvel or DC was doing this, they'd be ripping them to shreds on the daily. They'd be mining this content for months.
Right.
And the people he's associating with, I think they're disingenuous as fuck. And I don't know why that they're, saying, hey, yeah, sure, let's go to MegaCon together. Let's keep this straight up. I mean, what are they getting out of this? I don't know. But he's got real problems. And if this is what he's prepared to do to earn $1, he's lost my respect 100%. 100%. And there's nothing he's going to do to get it back.
Okay, fair enough. But let me ask you this. And you spoke on the silent majority that are watching and not saying anything, just taking notes and be like, at some point maybe make a mass pivot away from him. Do you believe that there is a majority of sycophants and weird fans that actually enjoy what the Soska sisters have produced and are happy that Eric has aligned himself with them? Do you think there's a bigger majority than people are willing to admit to a certain extent?
Yeah. Hold on one second.
Yeah.
My wife is sending me a text, probably asking me why I'm talking about this sick ass shit. Anyway,
I I got a wife too. I know the feeling.
But anyway, I'll say this. Do they have an audience? Absolutely. But for their audience, just like I'm looking at this as Eric going to the dark side, they're looking at him or them as going to the dark side.
Yeah.
I even got on my Reddit post, I put in there a tweet that one of their fans said, like, hey, I understand that you're being associated with the Rippaverse. I'm a big fan, but I'm disappointed. I don't think their fan base is going to translate because those people have seen what Eric July has put out for years and years and years. And I think they'll look at it as what you said earlier, a disingenuous cash grab. And I don't think any of their fans are following him. Just like he thought Chuck Dixon, the legendary Chuck Dixon, when he brought him on, probably thought that was going to bring down the house. No one gave a shit.
Yeah.
No one gave a shit. He's got his core fan base, but that's it. But no one else cares. And, we'll see what happens.
Okay. Does Eric strike you as somebody who is some sort of identity crisis and still trying to find who he is as a person? Because that's the vibe I get. Because I've gone through his last 20 years online of his life, and it just seems like he never could find, still looking for who he is, his voice, his optic or whatever to present to the people. And it just seemed like these pivots, did this, and that, still trying to find himself to present to the people. Do you see that at all? You think that's part of the problem? Why he's so all over the place?
I honestly don't know.
Okay.
I think it's more about somebody who just bought into his own hype.
Okay.
And I honestly don't know. I wish I did, but I don't. I'm certainly not one he's reaching out to for advice. And at this point, I certainly wouldn't offer it. But he's done his thing. He's decided to go down whatever path he's going on. But unfortunately, I think he's pivoted to a point where he can't come back from.
Okay.
He was too far. He was too much on the record before, as far as his views, what he wanted, his political position, social positions, what have you. He's kind of done a complete 180, especially in defense of these women. And he's, I think he's made his bed now, and he's going to have to deal with the consequences of it.
Man. Yeah, because logically it just makes no sense for him to align himself with those women or those people in general, unless the bigger play is a seat at somebody's table in the Hollywood boardroom of some sorts, or he's agreed to push a certain narrative and, for whatever the case may be. Given his declining sales, how many years do you give him before he either goes under or has to sell the IP?
Again, I can only speculate. Again, on my Reddit post, I did the best breakdown I could based on the limited information he put out after that transparency update that he put. And while I think he's sitting on a good amount of cash from every campaign, he's got less in the bank after each one.
Okay.
And I think he's making conscious decisions now to say, okay, this is what's working. Like he's got Yaira 1 coming out. Then after that, it's Gooding, which he says and Mike Barron has said is a standalone project. And he's got Horseman coming out in the summer, which again is a one-off, supposedly standalone project. And I think he's come to the realization, if I'm releasing first editions for the foreseeable future, I can at least sustain the alpha core numbers. I can at least get one, at least 1 million to say maybe as high as 2. Who the hell knows? But I think he's got a number in mind that he's trying to hit to keep the lights on. He just went to MegaCon. That wasn't cheap. Whatever he had to pay there. He had all of his employees there, getting those people in. The warehouse expenses, the expenses that he said he's got on the books, the employees and the contractors. He's on the record saying dozens of contractors and employees that he's got working for him. And I think he's putting out product now, not because it's what he wants to put out, but what he needs to put out.
Okay.
Because he's like, I can sell people, I'm not going to name names, but they know who they are, that have bought 12 copies of these fucking books, who buy every cover, every signature series book, who will buy every piece of new merch that comes out. He's like, I can milk these people enough to keep things above board, but we're going to see what the Soska sisters situation does for him. And I think it'll kind of give him a very eye-opening idea of where his bottom may very well be. But I think he's got a number in mind. Again, I don't know this for a fact, but he knows what his expenses are. At least I would hope. And he's like, I've got to do this, but I can't start putting out ISOM 3, Alpha Core 2, all of these books that people might not buy all of these covers for. I got to keep these people coming back for at least a certain amount of time to keep things in reserve, to do the things I want to do, and maybe not even want to do, but just to keep the lights on. And he's putting out projects, I think, now almost out of desperation, as opposed to like, hey, this is what I want to put out versus I got to put this shit out.
Okay. Do you think the Soska sisters is the moment people are starting to kind of wake up and be like, wait, this doesn't add up? I don't see this being the breaking point for the fans, but I see it. This is the eye-opening moment. This is the moment the fog kind of wears off and you're out of that haze and you're like, oh, this is what he's really doing. What do you think the breaking point for that silent majority would be exactly?
I think this is it, and I'll tell you why. Because most people, like you, and you can see it from the people who are the ones making these comics. They're older people. They're people my age and older. Whether it's Ethan Van Sciver, Shane Davis, these types of folks who are making this stuff. But these are also the age of people who are the majority of the customers. Well, how do we know that? How many young people who are barely scraping by living at their mom's house, maybe besides a couple of his fans, are spending this much money on a fucking book? $35, $28, on average.
Called me, and I'm sorry, somebody called me cheap because when I was told how much the book ISOM 1 cost, I was like, $35 for a comic book?
Well, plus shipping and tax, $50.
Right.
$50 out the door.
I'm thinking, is this going to be like a heavy metal comic? Is this going to be some Chris Fertitta artwork in there? Because I remember scraping up money for a heavy metal comic every month, and it hurt my pockets, but I knew what I was getting.
Yeah. So he's got a mature audience. When I say mature, maybe not mentally mature, but at least mature on their driver's license age, right? And I've got to believe that there are people who are of sound mind, who aren't completely cultist at this point, who are going to look at what he's doing and be like, this is what he said in the past. This is what he's doing now. I can't reconcile this.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it. I think I'm going to say this, and I hope to God it's true. There's more people who are thinking about this the way I'm thinking about it than people who are on his, YouTube fan pages, the people who are posting his replies, or the people who are going after other people on Twitter. That there's a lot more of people like me than there are of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is going to be the point where he finds his floor. I honestly believe that, because there's too much out there. There's too much noise. It's too readily available for anybody to ignore it and just be like, I don't care. I'm going to support this. And, I don't know, but we'll see. But I don't think I'm wrong. But I'll tell you this much. By the end of day 6 of the Yaira campaign, we're going to know exactly, within a couple percentage points, of how this is going to play out. And just to kind of give you an idea of how I know that, by the end of day 6, ISOM 1 was at 68% of sales. ISOM 2 was at 68% of sales. Alpha Core was at 70% of sales. His campaigns are very top loaded, and they last for almost 3 months, 2.5 months, 76 days.
Mm-hmm.
But they are extremely top loaded, and we're going to know really fast how this is all going to play out.
You don't see it doing well.
Again, I don't like to speculate, but there wasn't anything overly negative from both the writer standpoint and the Eric July standpoint, those two factors to affect the Alpha Core sales. He's gone and said, "Oh, people were talking shit about Chuck Dixon." Who the fuck was talking shit about Chuck Dixon when he got? I didn't hear anything.
I didn't hear it either.
And
Right.
I've got my ear to the ground on this pretty close. I didn't hear anything about that. But Eric July didn't do himself obviously any favors between ISOM 2 and Alpha Core, and it had a 7-figure impact. Now, what's going to happen when you combine Eric July's antics, rhetoric, and the things that he's come out on the record being in support of now, on top of the fact that the writers of this book are who they are?
Mm-hmm.
And also, people now have dissected the story. 3D assets, bad writing, poor editing, misspelled words. I think now it's going to come to a head, and he's going to find out how ride or die his fan base really is. How many of these, in my estimation, 8,900 unique buyers come back for Yaira? Because this was supposed to be his bell cow. This was supposed to be the anticipated title. This was the book everybody wanted to see.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had any part in putting a dent into this, fan-fucking-tastic. I'll take all the credit in the world for it, because I want to see this burn 100%. And I make no apologies for that, and I'll be on the record for that. I want to see this burn to the ground.
CK Mystic, thank you for the 5 on the super chat. He asked, he's asking you, do you think Eric's actions will negatively affect the perceptions of grassroots crowdfunding for comics?
Again, I don't know too much about that other than what I've heard, but I don't think so. And the reason being is Eric July has such a gap between him and that community, like the Ethan Van Skyvers of the world, the Comics Gates of the world, and the people who are operating on those like Indiegogo and Kickstarter campaigns. And Eric July has done so much to blow a hole in his credibility, and has been so transparent in why he makes the statements that he's making. A lot of times I think he tries to come across as these are veiled statements. But at the end of the day, he's making these statements, in my opinion, to his core audience. He's not talking to you anymore. He's not talking to me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to preserve who he has left and keep those people's support. He's not trying to win over what anybody would refer to as, mainstream support from the indie space. I think he has understood, maybe in his own way, that what he has done irreversible damage.
Mm-hmm.
He's in his corner, they're in their corner. And I think because he's become so polarizing, people will just dismiss anything he says about it. The people who agree with him, fine. But the people who are out there using crowdfunding to do what they need to do to move their product, I don't think are going to be impacted by what he's saying in any way whatsoever, because he has become such a polarizing figure.
What do you think about creators that like to intertwine real life politics with the product they're pushing? Is that a smart move, you think, or?
Well, again, I'm a novice in comics, but I was, growing up in the 90s when it was real big. And from my own recollection, I mean, intertwining politics and comics goes back to Captain America and the Red Skull, right? So I don't think it matters. If there's an audience for it and you can move units, put it in there.
Mm-hmm.
But find your audience and make sure there's an audience who wants to see it. And if that's what you want to put in there and there's an audience for it, great, do it. Do people necessarily want to see it? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not the person to really ask that question but if it moves product, do that shit.
Okay. Yeah, this, I don't know, man. I don't know who is around him, his staff or team or management. And I'm just floored at that they're just not reeling him back in and just allowing him to shoot himself in both feet at this point. Do you think there's anybody he would listen to at this point?
He said on one of his recent videos that Jeremy Griggs guy from Geeks and Gamers, I guess, has got his ear, has got his attention. Maybe, the Nerdrotics. But I think Eric and again, this is just my opinion and my observations, I think he's so desperate for validation. And people have said it in other streams that I participated in. It's certainly out there. If he really wanted to build this alternative to comics, he could have gone out and gotten young, talented, hungry writers, hungry artists. But
Right.
what did he do? He went out and started collecting known talent, whether it's Chuck Dixon, Mike Barron, um, unfortunately, Cliff Richards, Joe Bennett. So he or the Soska sisters. So he's gone out there, and I think he's in a way he thought he was living the dream. These are people who I've admired for years, maybe longer, and he's so excited to do business with them, and so excited to have them part of his world, to introduce him to other people in their circles, to be, collaborating with them. I think he just got so excited for that. Maybe he missed the point of the mission that he wanted to have. Again, I don't know that. I certainly don't have any, reason to believe otherwise. But I think he had the opportunity to really do something great. He had an audience that was really excited for him, who really wanted him to do well. I was among those people. But, he shot himself in the foot, and he continues to do it. He'll double down and he'll double down. He'll say, I'm going to move different. He's not going to move different. He doesn't know how.
He doesn't know how. Right, exactly.
And it's unfortunate.
Would the average person would have made the same mistakes if they were Eric?
Maybe. Because I think maybe the average person would have said, wow, I made $3.7 million. His first campaign goal was 100,000. And people say, oh, I think that was, whatever. I honestly think he went into ISOM 1 thinking, if I made $100,000, that would be amazing.
Right.
And he went into this, I honestly feel, with the best and the purest of intentions. But it quickly got out of control. But again, we talked about it earlier. He had the opportunity to navigate the landscape. It wasn't like he put out ISOM 1, ISOM 2, and Alpha Core in quick succession. There was a gap of over 10 months between ISOM 1 and ISOM 2. He had $3.7 million in his pocket before these books went out, before they started really kind of getting widely circulated or getting attention, to do some introspection and say, okay, I got a lot of money. I've got the opportunity to build up whatever I want to build up. I need to seek out good advice and good counsel. Get an agent, get some help, find someone who's going to guide you, find somebody who's going to help you with logistics, somebody's going to help you with their books, not your former fucking bandmates, not your buddies from school or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, to be quite honest, and in all transparency, and I'm on the record, I reached out to him personally and I said, I will help you free of charge with your logistics. Sent him and his assistant my real life resume. I said, look, I've got an MBA. I've worked for Target in a warehouse, in a distribution and fulfillment environment. I can bring you some real life experience to this. I will do it free of charge because, like he says, I want to surround my people who want me to be great. I wanted him to be great. I offered him free of charge. Hey, man, I'll consult. I don't want a dime from you or anything. I'll help you out. I would have told him, in what fucking world do you need to spend $125,000 buying 50,000 copies of a fucking book? Why are you going in to your second campaign buying the same amount of books that you sold from the previous campaign?
Right.
Why are you going into Alpha Core buying the same number of books that you sold from the ISOM 2 campaign? Why the fuck are you getting a warehouse? You don't need to. Why are you bringing in all these employees? You don't need to. For example, when I worked at Target in Tyler, Texas, at a distribution center there, 1.7 million square foot warehouse. In the department that handled, like just the outbound stuff, people who move product around. So 50 some odd different trailers We didn't have that many employees doing that shit.
Right.
I mean, I reached out to him personally and said, "Hey, I want you to be great. Let me help you free of charge." Didn't get a return call. Not, and of course, that's again his prerogative. But he says, I want people around me who want me to be great. Hey, man, I was more than willing to do it, and I could have saved you a shit ton of money in the process, and I wouldn't have asked for a dime. I wouldn't have even asked for an autographed copy of your fucking book. But you know, he's done what he wants. He's had opportunities. Again, speaking for myself and what I was, prepared to help him out with and give him some advice on.
Mhm.
But when you've got that kind of money to do anything you wanted to do, and to say, "Hey, what do I need to do to go forward?"
Yeah.
Get some help. And the best advice anybody could have given him: shut the fuck up. That's all you got to do. Shut fuck up. Either A, don't reply, or B, be humble, be grateful, and curse them out behind closed doors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think he could have gotten somebody on the cheap to tell him to do that. But, what can you do?
Just watch it crash and burn at this point. Chris Bacon, thank you. Where can the people find you?
Oh, well, I have a page on YouTube. I posted just like a few videos. I post them. I don't follow them. I don't read the comments, but it's Rip Reverse Detractors. There's 3 of them. Follow it. Don't follow it. I'm not looking to get huge sub counts. I'm certainly not caring about getting monetized. If you want to see my daily thoughts or my daily jabs at Eric July and the Rip Reverse, you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is CJB080781. If you want to follow me there, or over at Reddit, Rip Reverse Detractors. You can look at my stuff there. Again, it's just something I do for fun. It's not something I'm trying to get famous doing or make money at. I've got a good enough day job where I can do what I need to do financially. But yeah, if you want to follow me, that's where you can find me.
Okay. If it crashes and burns, you think he would start reaching out to people, or when the building's on fire, on his way out trying to grab stuff, will you think he'll finally humble himself to reach out to those he might have? You just don't see him doing it.
Nope.
Wow.
Again, because he's had every opportunity to do that now. Hey, after the fallout between ISOM 1 and ISOM 2, he could have had some time for some introspection to say, these were some real world results. I'm down 7 figures from ISOM 1. There's got to be a reason. Or even after Alpha Core, I'm down another 7 figures. Eric, I got good news and I got bad news. The good news is you're never going to have another 7-figure drop in a campaign. It's almost statistically impossible. The bad news is you can never have another 7-figure drop in a campaign because from one campaign to the other. But no, I don't think you would. I think he's too proud. I think he's too set in his ways. And I don't think he knows how.
Okay.
Whether even going back to his political stuff, this is what he believes. Go back to fuck them hoe ass roads. He believes what he believes. He thinks he's right. There's no going back. When he made his My Apologies video, that wasn't an apology. I mean,
clearly,
he doesn't know how to do it, and he won't do it because I think he feels like he's got something to prove. I got to prove the haters wrong. I got to prove the detractors wrong. I got to prove people like Chris Bacon wrong, or anybody else. Ethan Van Sciver. I'm going to prove them all wrong. I'm going to have 2 more warehouses before this is all said and done. Who the hell knows? But what can you do? But let me ask you this, because I've got you here, and I put this post out on Twitter that I was going to be on your stream. So I know there are people here who might not be maybe familiar with you, but I want you to kind of give people, maybe for the first time or something they've heard again, about the whole position that you have on how he's a token. Like, where's that come from? What are your observations that gives you that impression?
Basically it's historical. Anytime you see, white platforms, white anything, that's them. And anytime they invite a black person on for their viewpoint, it's like you really don't need them there. It's more like a feel good moment. It's like, look, we are inclusive. You know, we included this person that's not of our ilk and ask them questions about what they think. Whatever topic. That's just a long historical thing that's always been there. And my thing is, every time I saw him on Flash, Roddick, Drinkers, whoever, and it was just like, and it was basically when the culture war thing was hot and heavy, and I'm sitting here like, basically you have a bunch of white-owned companies with pissed off white consumers. Our opinion is not needed because we're in the minority as far as our monies, our sales, whatever they get from us, our demographic. We don't affect their bottom line, to be honest with you. So, it you could just the optics, like it's not hard to tell. And he just kept making the rounds, and he was like, so now you remove Eric. Now Flash has another guy, another black guy on there. And this is like, is it wash and repeat rinse? You know, it's like, you know, the Blaze will have always one black person, one white or one white woman, or one black female, one black male, maybe an Asian, just for the optics to look good. That's just almost was like poli sci 101. You know, and I see that. Other people see it. And I'm just more like, okay, where are the other black comic book geeks and aficionados to say this, to say the obvious? And I'm like, I can't be the only one. Red Sings and Blues can't be the only one. You see something that's off. You can't put your finger on it, but you know it's off. And that's my viewpoint on it. That's how it is. It's not my opinion. It literally, that's what they bring him on for. You know, because he has nothing to really add as far as, you know, his stance, his viewpoint, because he's in the minority, you know.
But let me ask you this. When do you see them saying, okay, you have no more use to us? Because if it's not a genuine relationship, and from what I have heard, again, I don't know anything, but from what I've heard, the people who are parts of these communities that he's involved in, the people he associates with online, have a certain way of doing things behind closed doors. Again, I can't verify any of this. This is just hyperbole, things that I've heard. But at what point do you see them saying, Eric, you're no more use to us, and there's the door. We don't need you anymore. Have fun.
It always happens. It's just a matter of time. Either he'll say something out of pocket, or he'll offend somebody that they're cool with, and that person be like, hey, I don't like what he said. Get him out of here. We call it the nigga wake up call. They always get that wake up call. It may take a while, depending on what their status in you know, whatever hierarchy, but they always get that wake up call. And then the question would be for Eric. So when they kick you to the curb, when they're done with you, they use you up. Are you going to come back to black folk and say, hey, black people, I was always with you. Now you see how they did me? I need your help. That's how it always ends up.
Well, I'll say this though, because I think particularly his political stance, and I don't think he necessarily, again, I don't know, but I don't think he necessarily got into his particular political way of thinking to appeal to a particular audience, right? But I do think too, and I think this is verifiable, especially when you see the people who showed up at MegaCon for his, you know, joint groups or his own groups. He has a predominantly white male conservative audience. And I think, I mean, it would take a lot maybe for him to, you know, ostracize the people he's associating with, the ones that you just mentioned, if he's still bringing that particular group to the table. Because I obviously don't know, but I don't know how many, well, I guess I do know, because of how, like, say, hip hop music has proliferated, like in suburban America, right? For example, that there's a lot of, you know, black people who are entertainers or in this space who have a predominantly white suburban audience. And I think Eric obviously is no exception to that. So, I mean, I don't know what he would have to do necessarily to have them say, okay, we don't have any need for you because we don't have any need for your audience, because he doesn't have a large black audience. He just
That's it.
So I don't know. And, you know, what to make of that. But do you think, is there any, reason to say that's one of the main reasons they keep him around, because they found the one black guy who's
going to
in their
say what he,
space, who has a large white conservative?
yes. I can't imagine how stressful it is, not just for him, but people in his position to always have to appeal to the mainstream. And when I say mainstream, white, Asian, Indian, the majority. And the pressure he's always under, this always say the right things to not offend them. That after a while, it takes a toll on you, and you eventually will say the wrong thing, or you just get tired of having to say the right things, not offend anybody. You just say, what the hell with it. I'm just going to say how I feel from my heart, and whatever happens, happens. But it seemed to me that Eric's alignment, it didn't feel organic to me, right? Like I go back to how I felt when I first seen him with the Rittenhouse picture. I was just like, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't look good. Why? This is none of your business. This is not about, it had nothing to do with us. And, he had enough clout and cachet, and they said, hey, you know what, maybe we can use you for something. The hints to Blaze and all that good stuff. But eventually, his welcome will wear out. And then, when they all get kicked out of mainstream, they always come back home, down the street to the hood. Hey, brothers, sisters, you see how they did me wrong? I need your help. Every time. Every time. Without fail.
He's going to try to get the Gig Squad back together. Start making dance videos again.
If he was smart, he'd be doing it now. I mean, honestly, start showing up whatever black audience you have, start showing that shit up, because if everything you point out comes true, especially with the Yara thing, it's just a matter of time. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I'm not going to keep you too much longer if you had to go, or if you got other things you wanted to talk about. But again, I appreciate you having me on. I'm glad I was able to ask you kind of in a long format, your take on the whole tokenization thing, because that was the thing that, really attracted me to your stream. Because again, in the detractor space, that's not something people are bringing up. I mean, at all. You're the only person I've heard that from.
Well, let me ask you, why do you think that is?
Let's be honest. If we're being honest with each other, most of the people, again, that are following him and are in this space are a predominantly white male audience. And that's just the truth. And maybe they don't want to bring that up. Maybe they're not thinking about that to bring it up. And again, I certainly wasn't thinking that. I saw on one of your streams that you were talking about that. I was like, I've never really given that any thought. But I mean, yeah, I certainly don't think you're going to find a group of white guys sitting around talking about a black man being a token for white people. I mean,
I'm glad you said that, because that just goes to show how different life experiences are. Like you said, it never would have crossed your mind. That's like me, thinking about women that 1 in 4 women may get attacked by somebody. I would never think, why would I ever cross my mind? So I'm glad we had a discussion, but it's still sad that that gap is so wide. The life experience is so wide, So yeah, never in a million years would you have had that thought come to you naturally, unless you heard or saw somebody say it. And I know Eric is more than well aware of it, but he plays it doesn't exist. If I close my eyes, if I don't talk about it, but it's there. Every time I look, and like I said, I don't want to pick on Yellow Flash, but anytime I see 6 or 7 white folk, and there's that one black guy, right? I'm watching them last week, and they had Dean Cain on there, right? Shout out to Dean Cain. And the black dude was like, Mr. Cain, I'm just sitting here like, you got to be fucking kidding. Please don't tell me you're acting like this on YouTube in front of these folk like this. Mr. Cain, it's an honor to ask you these questions. How was it, putting on the uniform for the first time? What the fuck? But this is what we see. And I'm just like, you have got to be kidding.
So let me ask you this. So you're looking at this, and I'm thinking about, because we're talking about it in this context, but I'm thinking, I would have looked at that and thought, here's a fan, geeking out over Superman that they watched when they were a little kid in the 90s, but you're like, what the hell are you doing? You're making all black people look bad.
Hey, there's fandom, and then there's just, you're doing too much. Then there's like appeasement to a certain extent, and it's like, you had to do all that, bruh. Like, we get it. We're excited. You're excited. But there's a way to be measured and calm about it. They're not, frothing at the mouth at Sting came. So why are you?
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Who the hell knows? But Slob, I'm gonna let you go, man. It's 11 o'clock where I am, so I'm gonna head on out. But I appreciate you again. Thanks for having me on, and anytime, man. I'll be glad to join you.
Yes, and I appreciate you. Thank you. Definitely want to. I'm invested into this now, so I definitely want to see how this turns out with you.
Well, I'll tell you what. When you have your partner on next time, the banter that you guys have had back and forth about this has always been entertaining in and of itself. Just not the topic of conversation, but I think he's historically been more reserved about you and kind of given more of the benefit of the doubt that you have. You're like, no, this is how this really is. He's like, are you sure? Yeah, I'm really sure. So, I would like to see if you would do me the favor of having him on to kind of respond to some of the things that we talked about, like, hey, man,
definitely, yeah.
What's this crazy white guy said about this? And what's this?
Hey, you know what? If you want to do a trio, we can all three of us have a conversation. You come up, I'm with that. I'm down for that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he seems like a great guy, and you two together are great and entertaining. For sure.
That's why we call it crabs in the bucket, crabs in the barrel. Because black folk get mad at us. You guys are just crabs in the barrel. You don't want black people to achieve nothing. Okay, so be it. So, yeah.
All right, man. I had a great time, and reach out anytime, man. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Will do. Right.
Have a good one, Slaw.
You too. Thank you, Chris. Red sings the blues. Where you at? We popping, baby. We popping. So shout out to Chris Bacon. That was fun. Definitely want to bring him back on again. So definitely, Red, text me, bro, and we'll get it in. We'll do a recap to this weekend if you're free. So the pivot continues. Shout out to everybody that came through. Shout out to everybody that donated tonight and just came through. I had a good time. Y'all pray for Eric July. Y'all say a little prayer for him. With that being said, I'm gonna get up out of here. I got stuff to do. I got a volleyball tournament in the morning with the kids. So I will be busy all day tomorrow. But Red, I'm gonna text you, bro, and see what your schedule's like in the next couple of days. So with that being said, I bid you all adieu. Y'all have a good night. Peace.